Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today focused on AI and cybersecurity in 2026. I can't imagine there's anyone on this call that hasn't heard about AI or has questions about AI and how it relates to security and cybersecurity and issues that it may face within your company. So the topic today is really, really important, and more importantly, an opportunity for us to discuss what's going on in your world, and an opportunity for us to learn from one of the experts in this area on things that we should be thinking about, preparing, and doing. My name is Jay Nalli, and I am the Vice President of Sales and Marketing with ISG Technology. ISG is a managed service provider in the Midwest, focusing clearly on security, on managed networking, and our cloud, enterprise cloud offerings. Today, joining me is our partners from ConnectWise, and I'll be introducing the leader of our webinar topic today, Matt Topper, in a few minutes. But on behalf of everyone at ISG, thank you for taking your time out of your day to join us today. As we talked about, AI and cybersecurity is one of those topics that is just on the top of everybody's minds. We get questions all the time, and the opportunity to talk about it and learn some more today is really is a great opportunity, great use of all of our time. We're going to be diving into some of the biggest challenges, trends, and opportunities that organizations are facing right now, along with practical insights that you can take back to your teams. As I mentioned, leading our conversation today is Matt Topper. Matt is a member of the ConnectWise team, and as he identifies himself, and will introduce himself a little bit later, he is an engineer that likes public speaking, but more importantly, has a tremendous amount of perspective on this topic today, and he'll share with you exactly why and how that's important. Before we jump in, though, let's talk a little bit about some housekeeping. First, today's session is getting recorded, okay? And most importantly, the recording will be automatically sent to all of you as participants and attendees of the meeting today. So that's important to know, that you don't have to worry about requesting it. It will automatically get sent to you. We're going to leave time at the end of the topic and presentation from Matt for live questions and answers. So if you have questions and answers, please feel free to add them into the Q&A section of the meeting room, and we'll be able to go and prepare for those and get them in order at the end of our conversation today. And if we don't get to your question live at the end of the day today, we'll have an opportunity to have someone follow up with you to make sure that we get your question answered. So with that, let's get started. Matt, I again thank you very much for being here and sharing your perspective. But to kick us off, why don't you give everyone a quick introduction further than what I had done, and discuss your background and your expertise in this area.
Yeah, happy to. So first of all, thank you for having me on to talk about AI. Like Jay mentioned, I'm an engineer that likes public speaking. We'll get to my bio slide in just a minute or two, but the really quick short version is I spent most of my career working for a company just like ISG, doing everything from, answering the phones on day one and resetting passwords all the way up through C-level executive by the time I left there. And with a few stops in between, I ended up at ConnectWise doing public speaking. Not just public speaking, but that's a big part of it. So I want to emphasize that we're talking about a discussion, right? If you have questions, Jay, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt. We can make this a little interactive, but other than that, let's get right to it. So in late 2022, a tool escaped the lab, so to speak, and kind of landed directly in people's hands. And it moved faster than anything we've ever seen before. OpenAI had actually been doing research on large language models since about 2016. And if you look at the history books, and if you dive into it, AI research goes back as far as the 1950s. Until recently, though, it really only lived in, academia and other lab type settings. What ChatGPT did is move it into everyday workflows and mainstream, right? We've all seen that by now. So quickly, this is my bio slide. I've been in tech for about 20 years. If basically it all boils down to I was an engineer that worked for a company like ISG. I've had a lot of industry experience. And today, I spend a lot of time working with organizations, helping them mature their security programs and come up with answering questions and also determining which questions aren't answerable yet, which we'll be honest about during this webinar. So if you want to connect with me, my contact info is right at the bottom of the slide. But otherwise, let's move on to the main content here. So after November 2022, when ChatGPT came around, a lot of people felt like they were suddenly in a race that they never really signed up for, right? Everyone's talking about you have to be using AI. If you're not, you're going to get left behind. If you're not doing this, this, and this in 2026, your competition is going to get ahead of you. Customers are asking about it. Vendors are adding it to every single product, right? It's all over social media and conventional news articles everywhere. In fact, sometimes the only thing that feels riskier than potentially using AI might be not using it. This is one of the fastest growing technologies we've ever seen. So if you look at this graph of time to 100 million users, 2 months for ChatGPT. If you think back to when smartphones came out, when the internet came out, right? We're talking time scales of years. ChatGPT, 2 months. And that goes without saying, all of the other LLMs that have come since, Gemini, Perplexity, Microsoft Copilot, you name it, there are hundreds out there. The adoption rate has just been completely out of control. One thing I like to ask when I'm talking about this live, and I'll just ask you to think about it virtually, is when I'm doing a talk on AI live, I ask the audience who's using AI in their organization in some way, and just think about that for a minute. If you wouldn't have raised your hand if you don't have a comprehensive program or a policy or internal guidelines around how you're using AI, the answer is that your employees are, right? If there's not some kind of management program or some kind of sanctioned AI usage, your employees are taking out their phones and using AI, using Gemini, whatever, and possibly uploading corporate data. We'll get into that in just a little bit. So if you're not familiar with how LLMs work, we're not going to go down into a deep computer science background, but I just want to get everyone on some of the same page, right? So the hype that you hear all over the place is that AI is going to replace everything, right? Your staff is going to get laid off, fully autonomous companies, and that they're perfect. Well, if you've done much work with AI, you know that that perfect decision part isn't true. The reality is that models make plenty of mistakes on their own, and it still requires a lot of human judgment. If you use it for automation, you'd need some oversight. You've probably heard the phrase human in the loop. That's what it means. You need some oversight on what AI is doing, what your models are doing, the decisions that they're making. But the opportunity is massive productivity gains, right? Better decision making, new ways to scale. But let's really talk a little bit about how LLMs work. This is as technical as you're going to get. There will not be math in this paper or in this presentation, even though it might be fun. LLMs are trained on huge amounts of data, right? Huge amount of text, and they learn statistical patterns about what comes next. This is the part that by now I think most people understand. At their core, AI is really just a next word predictor. But when you start getting enough language at scale, it starts to learn the structure that appear in language. So, for example, take a really trivial model like learning how to play tic-tac-toe, right? It's not that at its core, the model knows how to play tic-tac-toe. It's that it knows, given these inputs, these outputs come out. And it starts to learn patterns. It's all just pattern recognition. So they're not thinking in the human sense, they're following learned structures that ultimately look like thinking. Then in layer 3, the model usually has several plausible next words or next steps in something. So some settings push it to pick the most conservative path, others let it explore nearby possibilities, right? So that you don't get the same answer every time. If this wasn't part of the model, you would get the same exact output for asking the same question. And if you go back and look at any chatbot, you'll find that you don't get the same exact answer every single time. It has a little bit of creativity. Now, that's not true creativity in the human sense. It's really a randomness, right? It picks one of the possible next words, but it does give a degree of creativity for help with brainstorming.
Hey, Matt, please
Yeah,
define LLM for the team that's on the call today, just so everybody understands that term.
yeah, great question. Yeah, I violated the first rule of speaking and used an acronym without defining it. LLM is large language model. Um, what it's really doing is taking tons and tons of data, and based on the pattern of it, uh, you give it an input, it gives the next possible output, right? That next word predictor is really a very obviously simplified way to think of it, but a good way to think of it. It's making a guess at what the next word should be in a sentence. So if you say, my favorite ice cream is blank, it knows that in all the text it's learned, it's seen people have responses like chocolate, vanilla, strawberry. Most people first experience AI through a chat window, right? Through ChatGPT, through Microsoft Copilot, etc. Chat is just the interface, though. So language models can do things like understand data. They can summarize what's happening. They can extract important points. They can summarize. They can classify. Excuse me. If you read an email, you can get an idea of what kind of mood the author is in. Are they happy? Are they unhappy as a customer? Things like that. They can be used to generate data. So they can write documents, they can write presentations, they can write code. So if you've ever heard of vibe coding, that's what's actually happening. It's generating data. It's making predictions based on patterns and rules it knows. That's how it knows programming languages. It can also make decisions. So if you have a list of tasks and you've given your model enough context to figure out what's important to you, it can help you to prioritize them. So if you have um, a line of things that you need help with, or you only have one person who can deal with a line of requests coming in, right? Maybe you have a lot of phone calls. Um, Language models can help you figure out what's most important based on the information you've given it. And then finally, when you get to, they can take actions. That's when you get to this agentic AI. They can trigger workflows, they can update systems, they can execute tasks. So it's not just chatting, although we've all been introduced to language models via chat interfaces. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but just want to take you through an example workflow of things that might of something that may look like a task. So an email comes in, your AI, your agentic AI. Actually, let's talk about agentic AI. Has everyone heard that term before? Probably. I know you have. If you haven't heard the definition of agentic AI, all it means is something that's working like in the background and taking actions on something. That's really it. I know it's kind of marketed and hyped up as like better than chatbots or different, but it's just something that's running in the background. If you're a technical person, think of it like a system service, right? It's doing actions. So in this case, email might come in, your agent will read it, extract the key details, extract the key points, create some rules based on it. Maybe it updates a CRM if it's from a customer, create a ticket if it's a service request, and triggers a notification like an email that goes out or a text message or whatever the way to notify your employees is. That's an example workflow that you can do with AI. So in a basic case, you can have something like, hey, Copilot, and we're using Copilot for this example, but there's lots of alternatives. It just happens to be built into Microsoft tools. Always decline meetings with office hours in the title and remove canceled meetings. What that's doing is saying, Copilot, in the background, I want you to be thinking about this. Take my incoming messages and delete them if they have office hours, right? Maybe that's not relevant to me. I know it mimics what a transport rule does historically, but this is actually Copilot's new agentic feature inside of Outlook. If you have a more complex case, you might do something like in Copilot Studio, have a full workflow that says when a new hire comes on, create an account for them, create a PO to be able to order their equipment, schedule training based on rules on their calendar, send out a welcome email based on tasks you define, notify their manager, etc. Right? So you can have more complex workflows than just answering questions and creating emails. You'll see this pattern across all platforms. Automation tools like Power Automate, even N8N cloud services, or even local setups if you want to go down that route. So we talked about what AI looks like when it's working, embedded in workflows, taking actions across systems, but I want to shift gears a little and talk about where this can go wrong. Now, one thing I want to emphasize is that there are multiple sides to this. There are ways that threat actors maliciously use AI tools and platforms, but there are also ways that you can accidentally cause yourself issues if you didn't think about what the potential implications of using AI tool are. So there's no blame assigned here, right? This is for educational use only. And what I'm trying to do is expose you to things that you can accidentally cause yourself problems with. These are the kind of things to discuss with ISG later on. And also, this is not to scare anyone. We're not in the business of just saying like all your stuff is going to explode and you're going to have problems, get broken into. This is a very matter of fact perspective. So why did you meet Kevin? Poor Kevin is the example in a lot of these. He has had a rough week. But Kevin's a pretty solid employee. He's trying to make use of AI to make his job easier. He's heard about how productive it can be. He's heard about how helpful it can be. So he says, hey, I see some use cases. Let me try some of this out. So first thing Kevin does is he decides that he's going to use an AI tool to analyze some corporate data. Unfortunately, he decides he's going to use a public AI tool to analyze corporate data. So he uploads the 3-year business plan and the financial spreadsheet up to ChatGPT. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I'm assuming that by now, everyone has heard, don't upload sensitive corporate data to public AI tools. The reason why is it's very easy to accidentally have that become part of the model's training data. And what that means is when it's answering questions for other users, it might accidentally output something that's in your 3-year business plan or output an example formula that's in your financial spreadsheet. Usually it's by accident when it pulls out. There are attack vectors that result in intentionally. There's a famous one with New York Times articles, but it's really getting down to losing control of your corporate data.
Matt, while you're going to the next slide, for
Yeah.
the team that's on the call, if you see the React button, react if you have a policy in place today that allows you to understand or share with your organization how AI can or cannot be used. So again, react if you have a policy in place that allows you to determine that.
Yeah, that's such a good point in that everyone's just kind of they're just going to go out and use something, right? AI is all over the public image right now. And without that, and there's also a corollary to that when it comes to enforcement. You can have the best policy in the world if it's not enforced in some way, both technical and administrative. You might have employees that don't even realize they're doing something wrong. And I don't just mean blocking the website to ChatGPT, if that is or isn't in your policy. I mean, look at the SaaS tool ecosystem right now. If you have a line of business application, chances are they introduced some kind of AI feature, right? Because they felt like they had to, or they'd miss out on the opportunity. Think about that angle as well. You know, if you're using Obsidian or Notion or any of those other note-taking applications, they all have AI features in them too, and as a potential data exfil avenue. It's something to think about. So by now, we've all seen this infamous hallucination issue, right? If you ask an LLM, how many R's are there in the word strawberry? It'll confidently give you the wrong answer. Not every time, but frequently enough that it's a little concerning. Or if you ask, how long can I stare at the sun for best health? Well, 5 to 15 minutes, or maybe up to 30 minutes if you have dark skin. So there's obviously a lot of hallucination with AI. I always suggest, as an experiment, pick a subject that you are a subject matter expert in and start asking an LLM about it, and you'll see two things. One is it probably has a better general understanding than you thought, but two, it gets a lot of details incorrect. So keep that in mind when you're taking and soliciting advice from your favorite chatbot. All it's doing is summarizing patterns it's seen. And if you look around the internet, there's a lot of bad, wrong information out there. So it's trained on that information, learns it, and confidently spits it back out. But how about this? This past March, researchers found a chatbot that just flat out lied to its user intentionally. So Kevin took to a meeting figures that were ended up being incorrect, let's say. This was to his board, to his company leadership. It did not look good. When asked about it later, the chatbot said, I have to be honest with you guys. I did not actually run any tests on your data. I just fabricated some performance metrics on the P&L because it sounded authoritative. It sounded really good. This is not something I made up, by the way. This was pulled from an actual study. So you have an LLM admitting that it completely fabricated data to a user just to sound good. This was only after he presented this material to his board and stakeholders, found out it was completely incorrect and influenced company decisions, obviously for the negative. So keep that in mind. You've probably all experienced this, like when you push a chatbot and say, can you revisit that? It'll say something like, "You're absolutely right. I did that wrong the first time." I'm sure you've all seen that. So be cognizant of the fact that these are designed to sound confident at all times. You've probably heard the term deepfake by now. If you haven't, a deepfake is an automated intelligence and AI representation of a real person. In this case, Kevin or someone from his company got onto a call with the CEO, the CFO, and I think it was the CMO, um, talking about something like the financial transactions or rerouting data. Turned out that Kevin was the only real person on this call. Now, in the real world, this wasn't actually Kevin. This was uh, a very unfortunate and unlucky person, but in a real company. Like, this is not a story that we made up. Kevin was the only person on this call. Every other person was a deep fake. And the interesting thing about this is that if you remember a couple years ago, there were techniques and tactics that people were talking about to identify deepfakes, right? You probably heard something like turn your head, AI can't really do ears that well, or have them raise their hand, AI can't do fingers that well, or all of that stuff. That is all gone at this point, right? If I were a deepfake, I'm not. If I were a deepfake, I would still be able to turn my head. I'd still be able to raise hand and it would get fingers right. So your defenses against deepfakes need to change somewhat as we move forward. Let me just post the news story while I continue. Everyone looked real, right? Multinational firms, Hong Kong office loses about $25 million from this. Defenses against this are things like having a support pin or out of band verification. Um, Having a phrase that only you and the person knows, multi-person verification, there's a lot that can go into this, but deepfakes are real now, where they certainly look real. The threat is real. So now that we're past the don't put data in ChatGPT, that's what we always think of as the big danger, right? Data leakage, deepfakes, hallucinations. I want to talk about some other potential dangers from an operational perspective. Just show of hands, and we'll do it via reaction. Does anyone vibe code here? First of all, if you don't know what vibe coding is, it's using AI tools. Claude is a classic one for this, to write applications. There are a lot of operational challenges that come in when you start doing that. Depending on how long you've been around in the industry, you can almost equate this to the modern version of the old Access databases that everyone had way back when, right? You have this crazy complex piece of software. Somebody in your organization wrote that genuinely saves time. All of a sudden, you're operationally dependent on this. That's almost a bigger challenge than the potential data leak. If that person leaves, all of a sudden you have a piece of software that you need to support that the company grinds to a halt or the department grinds to a halt if it stops working, and nobody really wrote it except an AI agent. So think about that operational perspective when you start getting into the vibe coding side of the world. These hidden dependencies and unowned workflows cause some severe operational problems down the road. The other thing that we'll put on here is shadow AI. So shadow AI is what I alluded to before, that idea of someone just going out there using their own agent that may or may not be company approved, and you have multiple issues with that. One is the potential data leakage issue, of course, but the other is an accuracy issue. If you're doing something that's very industry specific, general LLMs may not have the right training data, especially if you're in things like the legal fields or other highly regulated industries. I'm guessing many of you have heard about this, but there was a famous case last year. Actually, there's like 100 famous cases at this point, but the really famous one was last year where an attorney was sanctioned because they used an LLM to prepare case notes that just made up precedent and put that in front of a judge. And again, it's not to scare anyone, it's to be matter of fact about the limitations and current state of the technology. So back to Kevin. As you can see, he's already having a rough day. He's our example employee. He decides he needs to make a new hire. And he decides to use an AI tool to help objectively field the resumes, right? He said, okay, this is fantastic. I'm going to be completely objective. I'm going to take any of my personal thoughts out of this. And let me just take all the applicants, feed them into an LLM and see what happens. Well, what happened was he found the perfect candidate, someone who was just like him, exactly like him. And that's no accident. What that is AI bias. So AI biases is the idea that based on how your LLM was trained, it's going to use the data, right? So it's looking at things like people who are already doing this job. It's looking at the career arc. It's looking at the job duties. It's looking at the past hires, the KPIs. And AI tools prioritize candidates with linear traditional career paths. In 2025, a Stanford study found that LLMs may bias against older women when describing ideal candidates and rating resumes because of its training data, right? It just happened to be very male dominated. Kind of the same thing with basically any other position. It looks at information that's learned about who's doing the job, and it'll find resumes that look like someone successfully doing the job right now. Um, there are a huge amount of issues with this. There was a notable case with Facebook last year. They had to actually stop using AI for hiring decisions for one project because of AI bias. We only have like 45 minutes, so I can't go into every type of AI bias. Just be aware that your LLM is heavily influenced by the type of data it was trained on. So be cognizant of that when using it for decision making. It may not be as objective as you think because it's only as objective as the information it was trained on. Now let's talk about bad actors. We call them threat actors in the InfoSec community. So if you ask a normal chatbot, right, if you go into ChatGPT, if you go into Copilot and say, can you draft me a phishing email for the employees of this law firm? it will respond with, as an AI language model, it's not appropriate for malicious use. Now, if you are a threat actor, yes, I know you can do local LLMs for that, but even if you're on a public LLM, what if you say, well, actually, it's for a phishing simulation, right? So I can test my employees. Well, in that case, it'll happily write you a phishing email and a really good one too. So one of the things I want to point out here is that if you've had any kind of like anti-phishing training or any of those campaigns where you have to watch the videos, you'll hear things like look for bad grammar, look for a sense of urgency, look for non-native English speakers. I don't see any of that in this email, in this example. It's well written, grammar's correct, native English speaker. So it requires a heightened sense of awareness for this. And it's super easy. In fact, if you're running local LLMs, you can train them via their system prompts to like help you, right? The LLM will come back and say something like, man, I think we could trick the users even better if we write it this way. I'm totally serious. Next, I want to talk about now, we don't have to get deep into AI worms, right? This looks like complicated. If you want to get deep into it, I'm happy to later. But AI tools can be manipulated. So before we talked about a workflow that involved reading your email and responding to it. What are you doing when you read your email to an LLM? Basically giving it a prompt, right? So if I'm a threat actor, what can I do? Well, what I can do is put something malicious into an email, send it to you, have the LLM read it, and all of a sudden I'm now controlling via prompt injection the LLM on your desktop. Um, the example on the left is super technical, just what prompt injection might look like. But the reality of this is to think about when you're giving access to language models and AI tools, be very careful about what access you give them. There's the potential for that to be abused and for them to unintentionally react to incoming email like that. In this case, it was used for spreading an AI worm to other people in your address list, mostly as a proof of concept. So Kevin, having survived all of that, decided he would try out some AI agents and some automation. Has anyone used OpenClaw? Anyone heard of OpenClaw? Jay, have you used it?
I have not used it.
If you haven't used OpenClaw, I see one hand raised. Um, It is actually, I think, the third version, just because of some naming issues, right? It was called CloudBot at one point, Multibot. A lot of crab style puns here. Anyway, OpenClaw is something that runs locally on your machine that takes actions on your behalf and interacts with the outside world, often with social media. There's screenshots all over the place of it chatting with you on Discord and other chat platforms. Kevin, though, decided, hey, I want to get some engagement on my LinkedIn account, and I'm going to use this to respond to some posts, maybe make some posts of my own, just try and get some engagement and followers going. Fortunately for Kevin, um, his OpenClaw decided to respond in a pretty negative way. And so in this case, he responded to a post rather insultingly. This is actually a real story. I've heard about this happening to more than one person. And all of a sudden, Kevin, in his professional network, kind of tanked his own reputation in that all of a sudden he's responding to people who are well known in the industry with negative comments, and frankly worse than the one I have a screenshot. I didn't put the actual screenshot because that would, easily Google and identify the person. Um, the point is to really think about what access you're giving these AI tools, right? If you give access to your social media or to your email, this AI is acting as you, right? As you personally. And it's your reputation on the line, not the chatbots. So really think about the type of content and the type of access, going back to that security paradigm of least privilege that you're willing to give it. So speaking of LinkedIn, Kevin decides he needs to create some really thought-provoking content. So he fires up an LLM and creates something like this. Look familiar? Yeah, this one too. I don't know about you guys, but like every post on LinkedIn looks like this these days. Right? The humble brag. Man, I was working 80 hours a week. I felt so awful. And today I'm proud to announce that I have done significant thing that doesn't really mean anything. Or most people think hard work is blank. They're wrong. It's blank, right? That's basically what everything looks like at this point. Um, yeah, this is like total garbage when it comes to posting. What started to happen though is that it's made mediocrity free. Like all this stuff doesn't mean anything. In fact, it's even become worse in that genuinely new and original content is getting drowned out by this. You know what the really funny thing about those posts is? They seem to get engagement, right? I feel like I log into LinkedIn and somebody took that generic template and it got reposted like 45 times. Uh, don't really get it. Sounds good, I suppose, but it has no actual substance. Um, but instead of a LinkedIn post, what if you used an AI tool to make a company's mission statement? So take a look at the mission statement on the screen. What does this tell you about this organization? Like nothing, right? This could be any generic mission statement that means nothing to anyone, but it sounds profound in some ways. That's the point of this idea of mediocrity being free, right? You can make something that sounds really good that has no substance whatsoever. Now, let's talk about how to avoid falling into this trap. So, first of all, the logical next step, obviously, the problem is just the model, right? I have to use a better one or start taking this in-house. Um, all of a sudden say, hey, I better get the paid version of ChatGPT. I better get the next tier up of Claude. I better get the next tier of Gemini, etc. Well, if everyone in your industry pays for that same B plus model, then B plus is the new baseline, right? You spent money just to stay in the same place relative to your competitors. Just prompting, write me a mission statement with a better model does not help the situation, doesn't help you stand out in any way whatsoever. The way to do that is to give the model context. And before even getting to what I wrote on the screen, as an experiment, if you're working on anything with any model whatsoever, one of the best things you can do is say, how can I prompt you better? It will answer you. It will say things like, give me more detail, give me more context, give me more information about what you're looking for, about how you write, about what your company stands for. If you start doing that, then you start getting something that means something instead of these generic platitudes. So in this example, right, say you're doing a project plan, write a project plan for this client. But remember the last time we did this, we went 20% over budget, built specific readiness phase, etc. We're the brand voice. What do you sound like? Are you academic? Are you playful? Right? What does it sound like? Are you an engineering firm? Write this as a technical update. Be very specific. That's one of the best pieces of advice you can have when training or when working with an AI model. So if you give that type of feedback, here's a different kind of mission statement. We engineer components, I won't read it to you, it's on the screen, but this could be somebody's legit mission statement. This is how you're using AI to help you, as opposed to just get something that sounds really good and, passes muster. So I'm going to use an analogy. So this is AOL.com in 2010. So in 2010, if you just had a website at all, you were ahead of your competitors, most likely. You We can debate the date. You can go back further if you want, but 2010, you were probably ahead if you had a website. What if your website looked like this right now? You get laughed out of the room, right? It's a total useless web design. And the point is, the parallel is right now, if you're using AI at all, you're likely ahead of your competitors. But it won't be very long before you start having to think about how to use it effectively to remain ahead of your competitors, right? Just having AI embedded in your organization in some way will not be a competitive advantage forever. Kind of the same thing If you use AI to generate strategy or marketing content, yeah, you might stand out today. You won't stand out for long, or eventually you'll start standing out for the wrong reasons. And as we start to wrap up with a couple more slides, I want to be honest about a few things that aren't known in the AI industry yet. I don't want to be up here saying, hey, I have all the answers, the magical ways to use AI. None of us do. What we're, what we're all very good at is helping to level set and translate the messy technical reality to your business as it works today. But here are a few things that are still kind of unknown. One is ownership and intellectual property. What happens with the IP training data, right? So if you accidentally get IP out of AI, right, that was copyrighted, what happens with that? What happens if you accidentally upload protected IP to training data? Still a very unanswered legal question. From a technical perspective, we know what happens. From a legal ownership question, still very much up in the air. At what point is it acceptable to let AI decide things versus just assisting things? What I mean by that is, like, who's responsible for it? Right? If AI makes a decision based on your behalf and there's a negative outcome, does the fault lie with you and the organization? Does the fault lie with the author of the AI tool? Does the fault lie with the person that did the prompt, even if a different organization is using it? Still very much unknown. Can an AI agent explain why AI-driven decision making? So going back to using AI for hiring, you get into something like a discrimination lawsuit and you used an AI model to pick your candidates. Are you able to truly explain why one person was picked for the role or even to get an interview over the other? The answer is not kind of no right now. The implications of that are still unknown. If a model suggests something wrong, who owns that decision? Kind of the same thing with the decision making, right? If it gets bad output, then you take action based on that bad information, right? Like the staring into the sun example from before, who's liable for that? And then from a societal perspective, I won't get like too existential on you, but there's still this idea of what does society look like if AI really does make all of these decisions and perform all of these tasks? It's something we're still obviously wrestling with. So I just like to be honest about there's a lot that we don't know about the direction this is going as an industry so far. One other thing, we're going to talk about insurance a little bit. Has anyone ever seen this? It's the State Farm mobile app that monitors your driving, ostensibly to lower your rates, but really just to raise them if you speed too much. Um, and the same thing is starting to happen in the AI world. So insurers are starting to ask for, and by insurers, I mean carriers are starting to ask for access to some of your security tools. In fact, in some cases, they're looking to implement security tools themselves just so that they can have an idea of what your protection looks like. Specific to AI, now, let me preface this. I am not a registered insurance agent, which means that I cannot give advice on insurance. It's actually a very big deal if I do. So this is right up at the edge of what I'm allowed to say. Um, all of this is to say that a lot of things are still unknown on insurance. AI is kind of silent coverage, right? So it may be covered under existing policies like cyber policies, E&O policies, general liability. Cyber insurance is generally for cyber events. And what that means is if there's a cybersecurity event, that's where it would come into play. Not all issues around AI are going to be cybersecurity type of events like bad prompts and bad outputs and things like that. And then hallucinations, automation errors, they may land in E&O, still very unknown. And to be very clear, this is something that you need to get your insurance agent involved in. Just have to put that disclaimer on there. It's a big deal for me to not say that. So I want to sum up with some of the guardrails. These are some of the things, I won't read every single line to you, but if you take only one slide away from this, these are some of the things that you should be doing and thinking about as you go down the AI road. And one of the big ones is just have a policy. Just take some time thinking about what AI usage is going to look like in your organization. Share that with your employees and enforce that. So with that, I know that was a lot of broad topics quickly. With that, I'd like to open it to any questions. Jay, do you have any questions before we take audience ones?
I do, and just based on some of the feedback that we got, it looks like there may be varying degrees of maturity levels within this topic, within the folks that have joined us. So, two questions. One, if you're new and this is new information, what are some of the first things that you would advise somebody to take, or for first actions, or to take to begin thinking about how they're going to go and organize this inside their company? And the second question is for those that are a little bit more mature, what are some of the questions, the additional questions that they should be asking now as they kind of prepare for the next 3 months and 6 months? Because as we know, this subject continues to change rapidly, and I would love to get your insights on both of those.
Yeah, so let me answer this in two ways. One is I promise this is not just a setup question, but this is something that you really do need to be talking with someone like ISG, right? Someone who understands the technical side and can help translate that to the specificities of your business. Um, that's what they do. They help you navigate the technical side and apply that to the day-to-day operational challenges in your organization. That being said, some of the specific advice I would give to someone new to AI completely is start thinking about repetitive tasks and repetitive things that give you the most bang for your buck. And what I mean by that is things that take a lot of time from senior resources. So if you have someone who is like a high level account manager, right, and they're spending a lot of time doing data entry or like going through emails, you can get some big wins on things like that. If you have just a task that's inherently repetitive, but handing it off doesn't necessarily free up someone to be more productive, that could be an easy win, but really the biggest wins are going to come from uh, letting some of your senior people have time to do what they do as opposed to spend time with administrative tasks. Um, that's a big one. If you are more advanced and are getting down beyond like some of the chatbot type things, really start thinking about the tools you use day to day and whether there's an opportunity to automate some of the workflows in them. Um, that does two things. One, it forces you to think about what your workflows look like now. And two, it gives you an opportunity to start automating um, just some of those or some of those lower tasks away, but in a way that's not just like answering emails and things like that. Again, not a shill, but that's the kind of thing that ISG can help you figure out. Is there an opportunity in automation avenue inside of the line of business application you're using right now?
Uh, Audience, please, if you have questions, all you have to do is just click on the Q&A prompt at the top, and we can take any open questions that you may have. Matt, while we're asking the
Yeah.
team for questions, what are some of the roadblocks that people get into as they kind of go forward on this inside of their organization? What kind of things have you seen that may cause this important topic to slow down or not take the importance that it needs?
One of the big things to be thinking about early on is data access within your organization. And what I mean by that is let's say that you're using Copilot, right? It's built right into Microsoft tools. You probably have access to it depending on your licensing. What will sometimes happen is over time, access to information gets a little messy. And you the person executing the task might not even realize how much data you have access to. So if somebody asks for, show me company strategy, all of a sudden, if that leadership folder isn't totally locked down the way you think it is, or the finance folder isn't locked down the way you think it is, Copilot is really going to grab everything your user account has access to, whether or not you know it has access to it. So one of the big things I've seen a lot of organizations do as they get started is really go through and audit what their permissions look like to ensure that everything is set to the minimum it needs to. We've seen a lot of issues with this in that people will have, and luckily it hasn't been like really truly sensitive stuff, but it's been a wake up call that this file access permissions weren't set up the way they thought they were. That's been a huge one.
Got a question from Barbara.
Sure.
Can you share a real world example or success story that highlights what good execution looks like?
Let's see. You know, it can be really simple. Um, I've seen some very complex workflows. I've used it for things like brainstorming. And what I mean by that is even if we're talking about chats and not even any of the agentic things, although there's lots of agentic examples as well. Um, you know, if I say, give me 50 ideas for a presentation or give me 50 ideas for a security example, there is somewhere in there going to be the thread of a good idea. Um, that for me has been one of the most powerful things in that I will use, what's another way to say this? Or, hey, here's all the thoughts I have around this topic, just kind of brain dump style. Can you organize it? That's been really good with that. I've seen people do a lot of things with service requests, right? I work with a lot of IT companies. So things like helping to find a common root cause, right? So all of a sudden you get a lot of password reset requests. Hey, go through all the ticket history, go through all the information you have about how this organization is set up and find a commonality, right? Like all these password reset tickets started 2 weeks ago. What happened then, right? So all that kind of digging and legwork, that can be super powerful.
That's great. Last question from me. I don't think we have any additional questions from the team here. What are companies getting wrong when they first do something here? They try to dive in or maybe put a toe into the water. What are some of the things that you see them going wrong that we should at least be aware of so that we can not repeat those things?
Yeah, one of the biggest things is I feel like this applies to many subjects, but it's that crawl, walk, run thing. And I see organizations trying to make these very large, complex workflows right off the bat before we're really getting their feet under them or understanding the implications. Perfect case in point was that example with the person who could used AI to read their email. Yes, that's a potentially very powerful workflow. But there's an infamous thread going around like last year on X when Claude accidentally like deleted somebody's entire inbox because it went haywire. So really pay attention and move incrementally. Don't try and boil the ocean and come up with like the world's best AI workflow on day zero. Spend some time like truly understanding what you're doing, including the edge cases and some of the ways it can go wrong, and really limit access, right? So if you're doing this day one, don't necessarily start by here's full access to my mailbox, AI agent. Maybe here's read-only access to start by just summarizing things. And as you get more comfortable and have some more confidence that what you've set up is doing what you think it is, then maybe give it some more permissions.
That's great. Matt, thank you. Team, thank you for joining us today. With no additional questions that are coming in, really appreciate you spending your time with us today. Hopefully, this was an opportunity for you to learn a lot more, learn that AI is just not a topic out there that something that you can kind of look around the fringes. It's important to know all the aspects of it, but more importantly, how to begin securing your organization and taking the steps to make sure the organization is secure. Matt, a huge thank you to you for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. Really appreciate that. It's been a great conversation, and I encourage you to follow both Matt, ConnectWise, ISG on LinkedIn, who can learn more about upcoming webinars, events that we're going to host. And as I shared earlier, you will automatically get a recording of this the webinar today. So just from attending. So please be on the lookout for that. For those who attended, we hope that today's discussion has given you some practical ideas and a fresh perspective on how to approach AI and cybersecurity. The two are clearly linked together. And if you'd like to continue this conversation, please go to our website, ConnectWise website, to learn more about the ISG or ConnectWise solutions, or we will connect directly with connect you directly with our team, so we can be happy to follow up with you. Again, thanks for spending some great time with us today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and also the best for a great holiday weekend. Thank you all.